I'm going to go ahead and welcome you to Chillicothe Public Library and welcome our special presenter today, photographer and wildlife enthusiast Julie Dodge, who is going to be sharing with us about backyard wildlife photography, how to attract wildlife to your backyard and set things up so that you can get some amazing pictures and other great techniques like that. So with that very brief introduction, I'm just going to pass it on to you, Julie.
Okay.
Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Catherine, for that introduction. I thought I'd introduce myself. I am a local of Peoria, and I have been photographing for probably the past, well, I've been photographing for many years, but really since about 2010 is when I really got back into it. And I was mostly photographing nature and landscapes. And recently, mainly after I had a broken ankle and was confined to my living room and a chair for months. And I'm very blessed to have a beautiful backyard with a beautiful picture window and a place where I could take most of my wildlife photos from my easy chair. So, I feel really spoiled that I have been able to do that. And I have learned a lot about wildlife and about photographing wildlife in these past several years. And I'm just really happy to be able to share that with everyone. So the presentation, we're going to talk about how you can attract the wildlife to your yard, because that is key, is getting them to come to your yard. And then we're going to get into some tips into photographing the wildlife.
When you go on, I'm just going to get rid of that little picture. So it's not taking up space on your screen.
I could do that once.
Can you see that? The mouse. There you go. If you can get those three dots clicked and then hide the next one down. There we go. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so the first thing that you need to know for attracting wildlife is you need to know, what does wildlife need? And once you establish that and you fill all those needs, every backyard can be a haven for wildlife. And you will be amazed at all the critters that will start showing up in your yard because you have created a paradise for them. So wildlife needs mainly three things, but we also have a fourth, because 3 and 4 kind of go together. They need food, water, shelter, and to sustain the wildlife, they need places to raise their young. And on this slide, you're going to see that there is such a thing as having your wildlife habitat certified. So you can be recognized for putting together an environment for wildlife and then showing it off to your neighbors. And then your neighbors are going to start asking questions and you're going to be able to sustain this. And other people are going to be attracting the wildlife when they're not in your yard. So food as the number one item. How I got started was I put up a bird feeder and we pretty much fill it up with seed. And otherwise, another source is like berries, wild foods that you can actually have in your yard. Either they were there naturally, or if you're transforming your yard into a native landscape, you can now control the types of food sources. So people often ask me, like what's the best type of a feeder to put up? What's the best type of food? So I actually put it in the list. My favorite is black oil sunflower. If you want to attract like cardinals and finches and really, you know, any of the woodland birds like the tufted titmouse and the chickadees, like everything goes for the black oil sunflower. And what gets spilled on the ground, the squirrels love. So black oil sunflower is number one. And if you were going to get like a mesh feeder, I would just fill that thing with black oil sunflower. And the next one is safflower. So there's lots of birds that love safflower. You would think that when the mourning doves are on the feeder, they're just like a little slot machine. They just keep ka-ching, 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 and they just eat that stuff up like crazy. And my favorite is to mix the safflower with the black oil sunflower, and you will get a huge mixture of birds. And if you can only have three things, then the third one that I would recommend is suet. Now, if you live in the country, if you live in more of a prairie setting than a woodland setting, suet might not be what you need. It all depends on the birds that are in your area. So if you live in the middle of the city, you might not get woodpeckers. So you might want to consider a different treat like thistle for finches, because finches are very common in the city. Then peanuts are loved by all of the woodland birds, especially the blue jays. Blue jays love the peanuts in the shell. And they have different types of feeders for peanuts that are not in the shell. And then they have different feeders that accommodate the peanuts in the shell. And then millet and milo, those are the little tiny seeds. And all of the birds love them. And because I make my own mix of food and I throw things on the ground, like the whole and the cracked corn, I do add millet to that. And that's for those ground feeder birds. There are a lot of birds that you just don't see come to your feeder, but they're there on the ground and they love to scratch. So birds have different behaviors for how they eat. And they're going to be out there scratching around in the dirt, or in my case, I have a lot of mulch. So they're out there scratching around to find their seeds. And then thistle, I mentioned, if you want to attract finches, house finches, or goldfinches especially, they love thistle. And the most important thing is if you are going to have feeders, keep them clean and the food fresh, because you can end up with some disease if you are not cautious. And we all know that there has just been a big notice from the state on the avian flu, and that is now over. But during that time, it was either important to sterilize your feeders often or just not even put them up. So the natural foods that you're going to find in the wild that will consist of flowers, and flowers have seeds, which is why the birds love them. We all really think of like hummingbirds. Hummingbirds, we know, like flowers because of the nectar, but there are a lot of plants that leave seed heads behind, and that is what the birds are going after. And trees are a huge source of food for many birds. Like a native variety that we all know is the oak, and there are over 400 different food sources on an oak tree for birds. And most of those are like different types of insects. So they provide a host of opportunities for the birds to get all different kinds of food. And then shrubs. Before I transformed my yard, I used to think that, well, I have my bird feeders set up, but otherwise I felt like I had like a desert out there. It was just lawn and trees. Again, I live like in a woodland setting, but I just went with the trees that I had, and I had no shrubs. And so I worked with the landscaper to put in those types of shrubs, the natives that are beneficial to our local birds and wildlife. And also the deer will love to snack on those shrubs in the winter time. So it's important that you take care of your new landscape plants. And then, as I mentioned, insects. There are many birds like robins. You'll never find a robin at the feeder because they're into eating worms and insects. And you'll never find the flycatchers and the gnat catchers. And when the birds aren't at the feeders, they're out there finding all that natural food. So again, the two sources of food are the food that we purchase for the birds and the food sources that we create with native plantings. And the second thing birds need is water. That is, one of the essentials that man needs to survive. So the wildlife needs it too. And we can either have man-made sources like dishes. Most people think of a bird bath, and those are elevated. And you can also put your water source on the ground. And I actually have a water dish on the ground because it accommodates all of the birds and the wildlife like squirrels and groundhogs.
I used to live on a lake, and I just put out a bird feeder, one of those glass ones that's pretty, and they won't come near it. Not a bird feeder, excuse me, a bird bath. Got any ideas?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Is it on the ground or is it
It's on a little stand.
stand? Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll just take them a little while to get used to it being there.
Maybe.
So yeah, birds, why do they need water? They need a place to drink and clean their feathers. I recently put in a pondless waterfall, and the number one visitor who is taking baths constantly are the robins. But all of the birds have found the pondless waterfall, although they go to the closest dish, which is right next to the feeders. And I do clean that daily, especially in this heat. And because it's a community source, so many animals are using it at the same time. So every day I empty it, I water the plants with it, and then I scrub it, rinse it out, and put it back out. So the different types of man-made water sources, that can be like a shallow dish that you put on the ground. And, again, when you do put it on the ground, you're going to have a lot more wildlife that is going to notice it and that is going to come and sit there. You can also have your bird bath, and they even have fancy misters and bubblers for birds. You can go to your local wildlife store or look it up and check those out. And then the fountains will continuously circulate, so you don't have a lot of those cleaning issues. And so far, like the raccoons haven't discovered my fountain. And in the winter time, it is so important. I have an immersion heater that I put in my water dish to keep it open when everything else freezes. And then you're going to have some natural water sources. I am lucky to live at the top of a bluff where at the bottom there is a creek. So the birds know where to find water if I'm not offering it. They love to splash around and drink in rain puddles, but we know this summer that's going to be a challenge since it's so dry. And then pondless waterfalls, that would probably be better than, say, a koi pond, because there's really no easy entrance point for the bird. And then also, if you want to make like a reflecting pool, I took this photo shown here at a fellow photographer's home where he had created a reflecting pool that you can set up to create some really nice photos. And the third item is shelter. So when those birds aren't at your feeder, they're out there somewhere. And if you can provide shelter for them, then they're going to stick around your property longer. And then they're going to be regular residents at your feeder. So you can either have man-made shelters like birdhouses, or you can give them shelters like bushes and shrubs, evergreens. And really, they just really need a place to hide from predators. And when we have bad weather, and they need to have like that safe place to raise their young. I have witnessed so many birds have like a failing brood because predators, even the biggest little birds, they come and poke holes in other birds. I found 3 little baby birds on the ground this spring, and they had all been poked. Even those cute little wrens do the same thing. It's all the so the different types of, say, man-made shelters that you could make, you could make or buy is a birdhouse. There are also roosting boxes, and how many times have you wondered when it is so cold outside, I wonder what the birds are doing? Well, they are roosting together to stay warm, and you can create like a roosting box, which is a little bit different than a birdhouse. It's got different dimensions, but that's where the birds will snuggle together. The bird feeders also provide a shelter. I have some bird feeders that are fly through, and so they have like roofs over them. And then I have like these little shelters for the feeders. So the birds, they feel safe predators while they're eating. So that's really important, just to give them that safe zone while they tree down the feeder. And then also, I have a ground deck, and that deck is a retreat. Anytime, like say a fox comes around, the birds will run underneath the deck and hide. So a lot of other that run under there in spring, when the animals are having babies, that deck is a huge shelter. And then also make sure that your bird feeder area not like just completely exposed to the elements, because birds they have a hard time going to an open space when they know that there are so many other things watching them, tracking them. I have lots of owls and hawks near me, and there's a Cooper's hawk that is constantly flying right next to the feeder and spooking the birds. So I have placed stumps all around my feeder, so the birds have a natural place too, because they're used to the trees and big branches. So they have places that they can hide. And I also provide perches for them to stage as they come up the slope closer to me. They'll keep getting closer on different branches. So if you have that type of approach, the birds will really appreciate that. And then this also applies towards other animals. So, once you like attract birds, other animals will come because you have those food sources. And then the last item is nesting. Can reproduce. Yes, nests are different. And depending on the species, the materials they choose to build their nests are different, and where they build their nests are also different. And something that will help the birds, how you can help them, is do not do a thorough fall cleanup. We were always taught to, rake up every last leaf. But now it is it's found that it's better to leave some leaf litter. I have left some leaf litter between my neighbor's house and mine up along the fence line, and the birds can go forage in that leaf litter. And then also it's people's natural inclination to your plant fall, but it is better to plant. Leave them until you're going to be seeing growth again, because those be counting on using pieces of the for their nest. Insects are all counting on using to and this is just a little information about birdhouses, because I have learned so much about birdhouses that one size does not fit all. And just by placing a birdhouse, does that mean that a bird is going to nest in it? It does not mean that, because there are many different considerations based on the species. So you would not want to get a big birdhouse and have a big hole for chickadees. So the hole size matters. You do not want to put a hole bigger than the species that you're trying to attract. Like for a little tiny wren, you don't want a hole that a starling could easily get in, because that may destroy the nest and brood. Then you also want to make sure that your birdhouse is ventilated, and you want to be able to clean it. So you really need an access door. A birdhouse that is just all nailed shut, it's probably not gonna last that long, because you're not going to be able to clean it out and maintain it. And also locations. So if you're a cardinal, you're typically going to be nesting in a shrub closer to the ground. And the same goes robins. Robins don't always, they're not high nest. See their nest. A lot of times you can like pull a branch down and peek in a nest. So that makes a difference where you place the birdhouse. And then you also want to make sure that durable and you don't stain. You want to keep it at least not on the inside. And if a birdhouse blends in, a bird will appreciate that so much more than a bright birdhouse. The brightly colored ones are really pretty ones. They're mainly for us to decorate with and look cool in the tree, but the birds like to blend in. Drainage is another issue. If it rains, like it rained like crazy last night, at least it did where I was. If a bird has a nest full of eggs or babies and water gets in, you want to just make sure that there's a way for that water to get out. So once you have all of these items, the food, the water, the shelter, and different places to raise the young, you have created a habitat. And you can actually, once you do this, sign up for a certified wildlife habitat yard, and then you can purchase a sign, and that is through the National Wildlife Federation. So I thought I would show you a picture of my backyard. This is what it looks like. It is really all about the birds. I live at the top of a woodland bluff. So my backyard is considered a woodland yard, and most birds, they can be found at a woodland edge. If you're in the woods, you're really not going to find a whole lot of them in the middle of the woods, but they love the edges where they can fly through. And my area is more like a savanna. And beyond what you can see in this picture, it just drops off to a really steep slope. And I recently converted that just woody slope that was full of sugar maples, cut down the sugar maples, removed a bunch of dead brush, and then planted a savanna mix of seeds. And the savanna mix has like a Virginia wild rye grass. And I'm watching the groundhogs and the squirrels and the birds, and everything is eating off of those grasses right now. So it is pretty cool to see that transformation, like just starting, and it's been less than 1 year. So again, in my setup, you can see where I have bird feeders, I got a water dish, there's that little escape for the deck, places to hide. And then I have the fallen branches from a storm from the black locust. I love those because they're really super strong and they last a long time. And, you know, again, birds and any animals, they kind of come up toward your feeder in stages. So they have a safe place. Oh, let me get up here on this branch so I can see if it's safe to come even closer. And then when they hear noises, they jump up on the branches and they're able to look out. And the birds look out for each other. They make calls and let you know if there's a predator. Let each other know. Sometimes you're the predator. And so I'm showing the shrubs around your yard, and it has just given me so much joy to see all these new shrubs that I've added to my yard, that the birds are in there nesting and playing and eating seed. The squirrels too. And I added a pondless waterfall because I do not have to clean it, not like a daily thing. So it's recirculating and the animals go up there. And then the perches. I had a friend last year make me a perch out of rebar, and it looks like a tree. It looks like a tree, and I really had it made like for winter. It was kind of during my transformation, and the birds love that tree because I love it too, because I can see through it. It's not going to grow up. It's there. And then in the winter, I even put peanut butter on the edges of the branches, and the squirrels eat off of it. The birds eat off of it. So you can attract the birds to different areas of your yard, like using peanut butter or suet. So yeah, you can see that I have the variety of feeders. I've got cylinder feeders, mesh, I've got the tubes, I've got the fly through, because all birds are different sizes and different shapes.
What's a fly through? Can you like point to one of those?
Yes, it's.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay, see the one on the left?
It's blue and straight up.
It's got like a.
It looks like a little roof
roof.
on it.
It's got like a little pitched roof and then a platform.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see
So
that.
it is not like a hopper feeder.
Mhm.
This is a laser pointer.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, we'll do
What's
that.
your time?
So,
Little red line.
good luck. Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Yep,
Okay.
right there. And the fly through feeders have like a mesh bottom, and this platform feeder also, it has a mesh bottom. That is not protected from the elements. So if it rains, the water will fall through. So like blue jays on a hopper feeder, they're like so big, they just have a hard time hanging on. Same as with cardinals. So on the platform feeders and the fly through feeders, that's an ideal location for the blue jays. However, the blue jays do prefer the stumps, but as long as there's suet up there, yes, and the peanuts, the blue jays are going to be eating that. And then the suet boards, by that I mean is having the longer suet feeders that has an extended board for the tails, because the woodpeckers are used to pressing their strong tail against the tree while they're in that vertical position. And so when they're on your feeder and they don't have that board for their tail, they kind of tuck under. And they love coming to the stumps too. 'Cause they hang on the side of the stumps and reach up and get a piece of corn or nuts if they happen to get there early. I also have different like rock outcroppings out there now. So that would also be considered a perch, aside from the rocks. And then also, I'm going to show you a lot of photos that I've taken coming up. And none of them you will see are taken at a bird feeder. Like the bird feeder is what lures them, but you can add like sticks and perches. I've used electrical tape and I've used electrical ties and wire to hang those so that when a bird does perch, they're on a natural like stick. So you can go out foraging for cool sticks and create your own photography setup. And then I also, this type of a setup, it gives all of the animals a place to forage, because you're going to have all those birds that are that don't come to the feeder or that like to forage, and that's going to give them activity so that even though you're feeding them, they're still doing naturally what they do, is foraging. And then I have this water dish on the ground, and the water dish that I have, it's a rubber dish that I got at Farm and Fleet. So it's like a farm type, it's like a livestock dish. And the birds love that because when they land on it, they have something to grab onto, is where some of the plastic and the glass, it's just too slippery. So they absolutely love that. And then this is what my setup looks like in the winter. And the deer usually rule in the winter in the afternoons. So now we're going to get into showing you the critters that frequent my backyard through my photography. So of the woodland birds, the nuthatch it's a pretty cool bird. If you've never seen it, I like to call it the upside down birds. And every time I photograph them, I notice different things about them. Then I have to look it up. Like their eyes are slanted and they're a different shape because they travel up and down the tree, usually upside down. So that's how come both of these pictures are in their little upside down mode. And both of these images, these are taken on props that, the one on the left, I went to a photographer's home and he had this really cool looking prop set on a post. And the other one is a cool woodpecker stick that I found. And many birds come to that. So I found a stick that had holes in it. I drilled a hole in it and then I put it on a piece of rebar and it attracts. And then I fill the holes with peanut butter or peanut suet or one of those butter concoctions. And it's unbelievable how many birds will land on that. I even have photos of the pileated to show you. The tufted titmouse, that is just one of my favorite winter birds. They are so adorable. And a tip that I have for you is that birds are typically identified by their profile. And just like cardinals and blue jays, the titmouse has a tuft on its head where its feathers stand up. And usually when they're in their alert mode, the feathers are standing straight up. If they're relaxed, you often don't even know that they have a crest because their feathers are very relaxed and it just looks like they have a round head. And the picture on the left, one of the things that I love to do is I create art out of my photos. So I added a hand-painted textured background to that image to make it look like a piece of art. The black cat chickadee. Oh, these are such fun little birds, and are they ever fast? So the one thing that I learned when I was learning how to photograph the birds while I was sitting there in my easy chair in the winter. Using a tripod, because these little creatures are so small and they move so fast, you have to have a fast camera. So you need to have an SLR with a nice long lens and a tripod, because the farther away you are, the more distortion there's going to be. And so you really need to have that tripod and the long lens for stabilization. And then you need to be ready, just constantly ready. And you even anticipate, because the bird sometimes lands on the same stick or the same spot. So be ready, because otherwise you're just going to be zooming around, wasting all that energy, scaring the birds too, because they're going to be seeing so much movement from you. Another one of our favorite woodland birds is the northern cardinal. And they're just fantastic to photograph in the winter. One of the best times to actually photograph birds is during a snowstorm. It's just a phenomenon. When it snows, the birds just come out in groves. So 2 different environments. One of them was by a reflecting pool and the other one was at my feeder. And the male northern cardinal, one of the things that I also like to do is, okay, I had mentioned earlier that you can identify a bird by its profile. So when you're taking photos, a straight on shot is really, it's not going to be one of those wow shots. People want to be able to tell what species it is. So I love the side profile, but I also love it when the bird's looking in a different direction, or being quirky, because those are the birds, those are the pictures that tell stories.
So go back to this thing. Okay. So the ones with the Greek backgrounds, did you like manipulate the backgrounds on your computer or something?
No, these ones, I had a wall of trees behind me. Before I opened up my yard to the prairie, it was just trees. So once the trees filled in, and then I also had, I think I was at like 6.3 on my f-stop, and I'm zooming into an object that is far away from the woods. And so it created that soft background.
So the bird's in focus, but the background
Is out of focus.
out of focus.
Yes. Yep. And of course, the one on the right, because the background is part of where the bird is sitting, you see all that detail. So one of the things that you want to do, one of the biggest tips is create a background that is free of distractions and objects. Like, move if you have to, adjust where you are sitting or standing, so that there are very few distractions behind you. And the eyes are the key too. So if you take a photo of a bird and you can't see the eye, or you take a picture of any wildlife and you can't see the eye, that is what makes a photograph. So I actually just upgraded earlier this year to the Canon 5R. It's one of the new mirrorless cameras, and it has eye detection technology for animals. So that is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. You really have to zoom in though to be able to, for it to see that eye. But you're really going to count on sharper photos. And so one of the things I like to do too, I like get that shot, that side shot where I can see the bird's profile. And then I like to capture an image where I can see the character of the bird. And while this bird looks like it's taken a nap, it's actually doing something that they call beak wiping. So especially the birds who are into the suet, they've got like suet all over them. Birds that are, on the ground and they're pecking around for insects. The beak wiping, what that does is it cleans their beak, but it also sharpens it. And it all depends on what type of food source that they're going for. And the blue jay is, to me, it's just one of the funnest birds. And it is the most vocal. There are many people that say the blue jays are the bullies, but from what I have noticed, just from the behavior, is blue jays are just big and they are confident. And so when they show up at the feeder, the other birds, they freak out and they leave until the blue jay leaves, and then they come back. But it's really characteristic of a lot of the little birds. They don't come around when the bigger birds are at the feeder because it's like a safety thing. And as soon as the big birds leave, all the little birds come. And the blue jay, funny bird. When you put out peanuts, that blue jay will come and pick up, like a half a dozen peanuts to see which one weighs the most. He'll pick it up, shake it, drop it, pick it up. And then when they're satisfied, they fly off. Sometimes they go back to the first one that they set down. But it is just such funny behavior. And I'm a member of the Illinois Birding Network Facebook page. And there are many other members out there who have made the same comments. So it's just a really funny behavior. And the image on the right, you don't normally see a blue jay in that type of a position. It was sub-zero. It was like minus 13 degrees. And the birds will use their own body heat to huddle. And a stick that was normally like exposed by a foot is almost buried in the snow. And the blue jays also puffed out, because that's also how they stay warm, is they puff up their feathers to keep them warm. So that's just another of those, like a pictorial type image that tells a story. And this here is the house finch. It was really the only photo that I have. It's probably like one of the most plentiful birds that I have at my feeder, but they just like to sit on the feeders and eat meat. This is one of the branches though that I did connect to my feeder so that I had like a cool looking branch. But the blue jays, they would come down from the tree, they'd land on that branch and it would spring them onto the feeder, and it finally broke. And the mourning dove, these birds you normally see in pairs, and this is also from that same winter day when it was so cold and they were so puffed out, just trying to maintain their body heat. And also sitting there resting on a branch and not moving is also a good way for them to retain their heat. But otherwise, these birds, I sometimes have 40 of them on my hillside. It's like all of a sudden it's a mourning dove party and they all show up and they're all out there foraging around.
He looks like his head is sunk down into the
Yeah, right. He looks like we do when we go out in the cold.
Yeah.
And this one here it is not a year-round resident, but it is a bird that we get. It's the dark-eyed junco. So I call them the little winter birds. They're here for most of the winter. And one of my, there are so many of my favorite birds, but I love the robin. They are so neat, just watching them hop around. They're always looking for insects and worms, planning their next meal. And I have every woodpecker that we have like in the state of Illinois, except for the sapsucker. So I have all the woodland birds and they come to my feeders often. I probably have more suet feeders than anything. I think I have 5 different suet feeders. So they're spaced out so the different woodpeckers can eat. And this is the red-bellied. The male is on the left. He's on my woodpecker stick that I had staged. It's just a really like skinny thing, and you can put it anywhere, unless it's sub-zero, because then you can't get through the frost layer. And the one on the left is the male with like the pileated woodpecker and the red-bellied woodpecker and the flicker, maybe the flicker. You're going to notice that the red starts at the nape of the neck and goes all the way to the beak for the male, and the female, hers just only goes from the nape of the neck to the very top of the head, and then she's got a little tiny bit by her bill. So that's how to tell the difference between the two. And these birds are big. And then there's the hairy woodpecker. The hairy woodpecker looks exactly like the downy woodpecker, but one is like a small size and the other is a large size. Otherwise there's no different. This is a female. The male just has a tiny bit of red. You're going to see that in the next slide for the downy. See, just a tiny spot of red on the male. And there's that woodpecker stick again. It's just a great prop. It's going to allow you to say, bring those birds closer to the window. And you might be able to find a window. I recommend that you clean your windows often and be ready to shoot. So I love the downy. The downies are like one of the most playful birds. They love to just chase each other around the branches by the suet feeders. And then there is the red-headed woodpecker. And I feel so lucky that my house is near Detweiler Parkland, and the red-headed woodpecker needs a large space to call his territory. And they also like savannas. Park district has open savanna, and I know where the bird lived. I had a neighbor that moved in that started feeding them, and it's like, I haven't seen the red-headed woodpeckers. Now they all are. She lives right in the savanna is. And then when she stopped feeding them, they come back. And the bird that you see on the far right, I thought, I have not seen that bird before. And then I noticed a pattern when I was looking at my photos that bird lands in the same spot as the redhead. I looked up juvenile. Sure enough, it was a juvenile. And it takes about a year for the juvenile to get its red head. Yeah. See, it's the same exact tree, same spot. Daddy was teaching him how to cache food. And then like the next to the largest woodpecker is the northern flicker. And I have nesting pairs of northern flickers in my woods, and it's a large space. They love to come to the feeders very early in the morning. So if you run out of suet the day before, maybe try to throw another cake in there overnight, because they'll be at your feeders early. And in this area of the country, we have the yellow shafted. As we're out west, they have the red shafted. And I really never noticed it that much, but when you see them fly is when you notice the undersides of their feathers. And the shot on the right, I was photographing the flicker on the woodpecker stick, and as soon as I hit the shutter button, he took off toward me. And so I got that flicker in flight. And this is the male. The male has a mustache. The one on the left is a female. The female does not have the mustache. And then, since I love the flicker so much, I also thought I'd show a couple more. I had in one photo it was like, I just couldn't believe it, that I got the male and the female together in the same photo. And then the other one, it just looked like she's singing with her eyes closed. And then just what their beautiful body structure looks like. This one is just sitting on the ground. You see how that's kind of not as, it doesn't have as much character. Well, it's just sitting on the ground with the food than when it's perching in the tree. And then the pileated woodpecker, the pileated doesn't show up that often, but when it does, you know it. It is huge. It's about 15 inches tall. And this particular day, it was dewy in the morning, and it looked like the pileated woodpecker had his dew on his head. And here's a couple more. One of them on my woodpecker stick, and the other one, he's coming in for a landing. And now some of the wildlife that come because you have been out there feeding them and creating this amazing habitat. Woodland squirrels. I love to call the gray squirrels the acrobats of the forest, especially when they're babies, and there's lots and lots of babies out there right now. So they're always doing flips. They love the sticks, they love the vines, and they put on a show for you. Just a couple more. And then there's the fox squirrel. And the fox squirrel, a lot of people think, oh, they're just like really fat. You've been feeding them a lot, but they're bigger. They're just bigger squirrels than the gray squirrels. And they have so much personality. I started feeding, in particular, she had a paw injury. Her entire right paw was like, she could use it to hold like food, but she couldn't walk on it. So I started tossing her peanuts, and when I step outside, she is all of the animals have their own personality and their own look. So that's her on the right. And then the groundhog. This groundhog has been living on my hillside since I can remember. And it's been over 10 years. Raised so many kits on my hillside, and here she is with one of her kits. They like to kiss their mama, and sometimes we get a spring snow. Nothing better than getting a dog in the snow. And then sometimes sure plays out a story right before our eyes. I took this photo, and it actually ended up, Phil Luciano wrote an article in the Journal Star. It was on the front page, and it was a story about the groundhog and the tufted titmouse. And titmouse like to line their nests with fur. And I even had a researcher contact me about this image because they know that titmouse will borrow fur from other animals, but they've never had one example of a groundhog. So yes, and it was one of those shots where, is that titmouse doing what I think it's doing? I had my camera on my lap. I didn't have any movements. I just raised it up and I took some shots, and it's just
that's awesome.
kind of a fun story. And then, did you know that groundhogs climb trees?
Oh my gosh, that looks like a sloth.
So sometimes it's unexpected. And I did find out recently that groundhogs are part of the squirrel family. I also have some raccoons, and this particular raccoon, she has been coming to my deck every year for quite some time. She's blonde, so it is so easy to recognize her. And they come in the springtime, and she has her kits. She comes up to eat, and then eventually she brings her kits up, and they get to eat. They learn how to forage. They learn how to hunt. They use their paws as their second set of eyes. So the one on the right is feeling food. And she brought one of her kits up last night for a very brief moment. So she has 3 of them. Actually, she brought 3 of them. And then I also get the woodland deer. I get them most in the winter. And occasionally, when the fawns get a little bit bigger, then the mama starts coming around. And the red fox, I've always just been super excited about the red fox. The red fox just like photographs so well. Last year, though, the red fox had 8 kits, and she devoured my squirrel population. I was thankful about the ground squirrel population, but I watched many squirrels get carried away. And there she goes. And again, I had my camera on my lap. I was like ready. And so I was able to capture a series of shots. So, and that is, that was the conclusion of my photography. And the tips that I would give you again is to like take a lot of photos, take a lot, because there are going to be a lot that you are just going to throw away because you like missed that moment. And then focus in on the eyes, try to capture the essence of an animal with its like profile or it doing something unique. And it's usually when a predator comes, like a flyby from a hawk, that's when the animals get most animated. They all freeze. You just get some really funny shots rather than them just eating, because just getting pictures of them eating is kind of boring. So be ready for those shots. And just, you know, once, like I said, once you start feeding them, they're going to come, but I still treat them like wildlife. I do not go out there and try to be their friend, just the one squirrel. In all the years that I've lived there, that's the only time that I've done that. I did get bit by a squirrel this spring because somebody hit it and its back legs were paralyzed. And I went out there to put it into a pet carrier so I could take it to a rehabilitator, and not thinking I got my biggest pair of gloves, but no, they were puffy polyfill, not leather. And I got a little bite from the squirrel. But there, if you do find wildlife, you don't want to try to raise them yourself. There's our rehabilitators out there, and there is a vet in Pekin that will take an injured animal, and they will also raise orphans, which I've never found an orphan. I've had bird strikes. If you do have a bird strike, because if you're photographing near a window, if your bird feeder is near a window and that hawk comes by, that's usually when the bird strikes happen. I usually go outside, I'll pick up the bird, I'll hold it in my hand. It's usually, you know, it's so much better to upright them than them to lay on the ground and possibly be eaten by a predator. A raccoon could easily grab it and it's gone. So I upright them and then I hold them until they come back, and I make sure it can grip my finger, and then they usually fly off on their own. And if they can't, then like put them in a dark place, you know, like a box, and wait and call a rehabilitator. So do we have any questions?
What kind of lens do you use?
Well, you can put a lot of money into lenses, but I am perfectly satisfied with the Tamron 150 to 600. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty heavy.
It's pretty heavy. So when I'm photographing birds that requires such steadiness, and so in getting the steadiness, that lens just seems like it gets heavier and heavier. So I either use a monopod or a tripod.
There's a there's an app you can get called Merlin, Merlin. And if you take it, well, it's not gonna work here because we're inside, but if you take it outside and just kind of hold it out there, it will identify all the birds by their songs.
Oh.
And then also, I don't know if this is working here or not with a photo or not, but you can also get a photo ID. Let's see it. Pictures.
Yeah, what,
Anyway, and then they also have, the photo has to be on my.
so if anyone makes it to the library before the end of June, there is a show of photographs in the conference room that you can come and look at. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And I hope that you learned a little bit about attracting wildlife to your backyard and some photography tips for capturing all of the excitement that is going on in your habitat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. It was wonderful to have you here. I think it was such beautiful pictures and great tips for attracting wildlife.
Thank you, Catherine.
And I want to second that about the exhibit. Along with the library, it's up to the end of June. Some really perky, sweet little birds here on the wall of the conference.
And where is that?
Great. for the-
Oh, I thought you were talking about a different room.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll wrap it up. So thank you so much.
Thanks.